Welcome to the Water Resources Outlook for July 21st, 2016. Jeff and I will try and address some of the issues facing the Southeast in the coming months. The drought being one of those issues, and we can't forget the potential flooding issues that may crop up in some portions of our area. We will do our best to address this in the July edition of the Water Resources Outlook. Let's begin with Jeff and some climatology from the last month.
Thanks, Todd. So looking at the last 30 days of precipitation, we see the continued dry weather across most of the southeast with deficits across most of Alabama, Georgia, and Florida. Florida seems to have the greatest deficits with more of those orange and red colors indicating deficits of 2 inches or more. The exception to the dry weather has been the wet weather across North Carolina, Virginia, and even that eastern portion of South Carolina where surplus amounts of 4+ inches are indicated by the purple colors there. Since the beginning of the year, just the opposite for the Florida Peninsula. They still have a surplus even though the last 30 days has been dry. The bullseye of dryness remains there across northern Alabama, most of Georgia, and across western portions of the Carolinas. Deficits now up to 10 inches or more there, seen in the red color across parts of the southern Appalachians. So what has this done to stream flows? You can see the stream flows look pretty much like the year-to-date precipitation map, with stream flows now in the below to much below level across the upper Chattahoochee River Basin as well as the upper Coosa watershed and others there in North Georgia and northern Alabama. Stream flows remain above normal across the Roanoke, Cape Fear, and Chowan watersheds in North Carolina and Virginia, and even some points in the Florida Peninsula, even with the recent dry weather seen near to above normal stream flow values. So with all the dry weather, we see our drought area continues to expand. Now more than a third of Georgia is in the drought conditions, with nearly 10% of the state now in extreme drought conditions. As far as the southeast as a whole, about a third of the region is experiencing at least abnormally dry conditions. This is a big change from late March, as you see here, where we had no drought and only a small area of abnormally dry conditions. The summer has been fairly dry and hot, so we have gone into the drought quickly. We will continue to see the drought worsen or expand, and Todd will talk more on that later in the show. So how have our reservoirs been faring? Well, in North Carolina, the reservoirs are looking good as far as the water resources and keeping toward their target pools. Most are running near to just a bit higher than target. But as we go into South Carolina, now we see the Savannah Reservoir Project. Hartwell, Russell, and Thurman all a bit lower than their target for this time of year, as the headwaters of the Savannah are located in that area of larger rainfall deficits in North Georgia and far upstate South Carolina. Going well over into the Alabama rivers reservoirs, we see most are close to target, maybe a little below, but again, many of these reservoirs originating in the headwaters there in that drought area, so we may see some impact as we go into the fall. With that being said, many of these reservoirs do begin to drop their pools in the fall for the winter wet season. And now looking at the Georgia reservoirs, we see the Corps of Engineer project there at Lake Lanier now about 4 feet below target. Projected levels are expected to continue to fall. Lanier has not been this low for this time of year since 2012, and we are actually tracking fairly close to the 2011 levels for this point in the year. How low will it go is hard to say, but the trend is dry, so we will continue to see it fall for a while. Looking at West Point and W.F. George, both below target by a foot or more, so most of the Georgia lakes feeling the effect of the dry weather in the headwaters of these rivers. So as far as the weather of the next week, we are looking at that dome of hot weather encompassing most of the southern U.S. right now, with the center near Texas. We are here in the southeast or on the eastern periphery of that heat ridge, and so we are at least getting some break with afternoon thunderstorms. That activity may calm down a bit over the weekend as the nose of the heat ridge pushes east into the region, so thunderstorm activity may become even more isolated over the weekend, with temperatures soaring into the 90s most locations and maybe even some triple digits. Next week, that ridge retrogrades back to the west, and this may bring a better chance for some thunderstorm activity, but will still remain hot. So overall, not much change, more of the same. Hot with isolated to scattered storms will be the theme through the next week, with no real large-scale rain systems, and the tropics still look quiet for now. So pretty typical weather for this time of year.
Again this month, let's look at the climatology of the hurricane season and then look at a more timely snapshot. Here are the August and September origin regions for Atlantic tropical storms. As we get close to August, we really do see a ramp up in the number of storms. The real increase in frequency comes about the middle of August and then peaks in the middle of September, then back down by the middle of October. By the time we do our next WRO, that will probably be our biggest concern. Well, that and the drought. Here are the points of historical formation through August 10th. It is a mix of Atlantic, Caribbean, and Gulf development. However, as we go from July to August, you can see how the focus shifts to the western Atlantic. We will have to watch the whole basin a little more carefully now. One last thing, the waters in the Gulf have an above normal temperature for this time of year, so if something does form, there is plenty of fuel to feed a storm. The ENSO forecast plume that we are looking at now is the most recent one. We continue to plan for La Nina in late summer and early fall. Except that maybe there is some hope. Don't get too excited, but the most recent run of the ECMWF, the European mid-range model, showed a likely neutral forecast as we approach winter. All this means is that La Nina is not a done deal for this winter. This is something we will need to continue to watch in hopes that we are in maybe more neutral and can potentially have more neutral conditions and can potentially have beneficial rains in the fall and winter. However, that is not what we are forecasting. Most of the southeast is looking at equal chances for above normal, near normal, or below normal rainfall for August. The one area that is leaning towards drier conditions is an area centered around Mobile Bay and spreading out through Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana and clips the Florida Panhandle. During the summer months and into fall, we really need above rainfall in most areas if we are to stay out of drought, especially if we had recent dryness anyway. If we don't see above normal rainfall in these areas for the next few months, drought will continue. We will then have to look to winter to improve conditions. At that time, normal precipitation can improve conditions in the southeast. And here's our seasonal forecast from the Climate Prediction Center, which doesn't give us much hope to improve the areas that Jeff described earlier in the drought monitor. On the other side of the coin, we need to be concerned about the central and south Florida area as we continue through their wet season. Models continue to hit at active tropical weather, and Florida and Texas may end up being wet during this time. The Florida Peninsula will be the focus for rainfall and potential flooding. We will continue to watch it closely. Heat, and more heat. We can expect it to stay warmer than normal over the southeast through October, while not directly impacting the rivers so much. Indirectly through increased water usage, more evaporation out of the soils, and so forth are factors that will impact conditions across the area. And even though I haven't shown it, the warmer than normal conditions are expected to continue into the winter.
So overall, we've seen the drought expand since June as dry and hot weather prevails across parts of Georgia and Alabama, and thus this will begin affecting rivers. As you see, many of these drought areas feed these rivers, and so the effects hydrologically will be felt way away from those drought-designated areas in the drought monitor. You see now the drought areas are into the headwaters of the Tombigbee, Black Warrior, Coosa, Tallapoosa, as well as the Saluda in South Carolina. So these rivers and downstream will see the effects potentially as far as water resources. Switching gears to flood potential. So just as in June, North Carolina and the southern half of the Florida Peninsula now remain the most vulnerable to flooding given their conditions. So what is this showing is that if we had a tropical system or a significant rain producing system coming toward the southeast, these two areas in the red colors are the rivers and areas most prone to river flooding, the most vulnerable right now to flooding.
And so the bottom line still looks like pop-up thunderstorms from the southeast, kind of going back and forth, some days less frequent, some days more frequent, but the one thing we can count on is continued heat across all of the southeast. Florida kind of remains in a normal wet pattern, and they've been a little dry recently, but they look to stay in maybe a normal pattern, and then as we get into the long term, Florida might see an increase in showers and thunderstorms as tropical activity will start to increase during the month of August and September and that time frame. But as I mentioned before, continued heat through this whole period through October, and will remain dry for the most part, with a slight chance for normal rainfall. I think we've got equal chances across parts of the southeast. But even if we get normal rainfall, it will only stall the drought. We have to have above normal rainfall to really get us out of this drought in those places. So the drought is likely to spread and intensify for a good chunk of the southeast. That core in Georgia has spread out some. It may continue to spread out as we start to see more impacts along the rivers in those areas. Our next water resources outlook is expected to be recorded on August 18th. Have a good month.